will drop everything and rush to her aid. If you are one of those, then you will appreciate that this planet is also our mother, Mother Earth. She needs all 8 billion of us to help her, and she needs that help now. And she isn't asking for much. She's just urging us to plant one tree at a time. If each and every one of us can plant one sapling and nurture it till it becomes a tall, robust, life-giving tree, then we will provide Mother Earth a lifeline. Just like Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi took it upon himself to plant one tree on the World Environment Day this year. A simple yet actionable gesture. We urge each and every one of you to take the leap. Each one, plant one. So, you may be wondering, sitting at home, watching this special broadcast, this special message, why are we launching this initiative? And why should you take this initiative seriously? Now, here's a primer to India's forest cover and its tree cover, particularly over the last 20 years. India currently has less than a quarter of its area under total forest cover. Less than a quarter of India's land mass has forest cover. Between 2000 and 2023, that's in the last 20 plus years, India has lost as much as 2.33 million hectares of tree cover. That is a massive amount of land area that's been lost to deforestation. India, in the last 20 years, and we're all living proof of this, it's experienced massive and intense heat waves. In fact, this past summer, temperatures, particularly in northern India, in the national capital, Delhi and surrounding areas, soared above 50 degrees centigrade. Several regions in India, even as we speak right now, even though the monsoons have hit large parts of India, they're still facing a water scarcity. In fact, half of India's districts have experienced deficient rainfall in the month of June, and this is despite the monsoon hitting the coastal areas. Flash floods, for example, have increased by almost a third since 2019. That's just in the last 5 years. There's been a 35% increase in flash floods across the country. And more than half of India's forests are exposed to some form of occasional fires. So as climate change begins to impact us much more than ever before, it has become vital for each one of us to help repair the damage that we, humankind, have done to Mother Earth. Hence, it's the duty of each one of us to plant one tree. The News 18 network, India's largest news network, is taking the step towards this and launching Project One Tree. It's a movement aimed to mobilize every Indian to plant one tree. One tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. We urge you to join us in this noble endeavor.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
And as we launch Project One Tree, we are indeed honored to present a special message from our esteemed President Draupadi Murmu. She will enlighten us on the significance of championing Project One Tree to combat environmental challenges. Join us as President Murmu shares her vision on fostering a greener and more sustainable future.
देवियों और स्वजनों, मैं आप सबको पर्यावरण संरक्षण की दिशा में किए जा रहे इस सराहनीय प्रयास के लिए शुभकामनाएं देती हूँ। आज जलवायु परिवर्तन की गंभीर समस्या हम सबके सामने है। कुछ दिन पहले हीट वेव के विनाशकारी प्रभाव हमने देखे। कहीं अनेक लोगों की मृत्यु हो गई है और कहीं जंगलों में भयंकर आग फैल गई थी। इस चुनौती के हानिकारक प्रभाव देश और दुनिया में समाज, अर्थव्यवस्था, लोगों के स्वास्थ्य और पर्यावरण संबंधी सभी क्षेत्रों में दिखाई दे रही है। इनसे विकास की गति पर तो असर पड़ता ही है, साथ ही विभिन्न क्षेत्र में कई आपदाएं भी सामने आती है। इसलिए ये अति आवश्यक है कि सामूहिक प्रयासों के द्वारा ऐसे मजबूत और स्थायी समाधान खोजे जाए जो जलवायु परिवर्तन की चुनौती का सामना करने में सहायक हो। आज विश्व स्तर पर अनेक ऐसे नीतियाँ बनाई जा रही है और ऐसे कार्यक्रम लागू किए जा रहे हैं जो पर्यावरण के हित में है और स्थायी विकास को बढ़ावा दे रहे हैं। इस दिशा में अनेक प्रयास हो रही है, लेकिन हमें हर स्तर पर, हर क्षेत्र में अनेक कदम उठाने पड़ेंगे। इसी दिशा में एक महत्वपूर्ण प्रयास है पेड़ लगाना। पेड़ों के जरिए पृथ्वी सांस लेती है। पेड़ ऑक्सीजन प्रदान करके वायु के गुणवत्ता में सुधार करते हैं, पानी और मिट्टी का संरक्षण करते हैं और वन्य जीवन को भी आश्रय देते हैं। मैं देशवासियों से आग्रह करती हूँ कि वे कम से कम एक पेड़ जरूर लगाएं। अगर देश के करोड़ों लोग पेड़ लगाएंगे तो पर्यावरण संरक्षण के लिए ये बहुत प्रभावी सिद्ध होगा। ये पृथ्वी के प्रति हर व्यक्ति, हर समुदाय की जिम्मेदारी है। आइए हम सब कम से कम एक एक पेड़ अवश्य लगाएं और उनकी देखभाल करने की भी जिम्मेदारी लें। आज हम जो भी पेड़ लगाएंगे वो हमारे आने वाली पीढ़ियों के बेहतर भविष्य की दिशा में एक महत्वपूर्ण योगदान होगा। मैं इस पहल के लिए पुनः आप सबकी सराहना करती हूँ। ऐसे महत्वपूर्ण विषय के संबंधों में एकजुट होना और समाधान की ओर बढ़ना अत्यंत प्रशंसनीय है। मुझे आशा है कि ऐसे प्रयास हमारे देश के सभी लोग, विशेषकर बच्चों और युवाओं को पर्यावरण संरक्षण के लिए प्रेरित करेंगे। मैं स्वस्थ, हरित और उज्जवल भविष्य के लिए आप सबको शुभकामनाएं देती हूँ। धन्यवाद। जय हिंद, जय भारत।
We truly and deeply appreciate the encouraging words of President Srimati Draupadi Murmu for the One Tree initiative. Your commitment to environmental sustainability does indeed set a powerful example. Now let's move forward. Let's take a moment to show you how News 18 editors have come forth to try and set a precedent with each one of us planting one tree, a role model which we hope each one of you can follow.
Well, we are all experiencing the devastating impact of climate change. It is time for us to act now. We don't have the luxury to wait any longer.
This tree is going to be named Anand's friend.
तो प्यारा सा पेड़ आज से रुबिका लियाकत का साथी है।
ये एक ऐसा मित्र है जो जीवन भर आपका साथ देगा।
ज्यादा नहीं तो कम से कम एक पौधा, एक पेड़ अवश्य लगाएं, जरूर लगाएं।
It's not just about planting one tree, it's about taking care of this planet. All right, let's delve a little deeper, understand the different dynamics into how trees can become your best friend and, of course, a solution to our climate change problem. Joining me for this special conversation here in our studios, Swami Prem Parivartan or People Baba. He's an environmentalist, a noted environmentalist who's, of course, been planting trees for a number of years now. Pradeep Shah is the founder of Grow Trees. He's also joining us on this broadcast. Let me start with you, sir. You know, at one level, if you look at it, people might say, oh, planting one tree, what difference does it really make? But tell our viewers why initiatives such as this have worked, not just here in India, but in other parts of the world, and how trees are the best solution to sort of mitigate this climate change problem.
You need to understand one thing, that just planting a sapling doesn't end the game. Yeah. It's just a beginning. It's just a gesture. It's just a symbolic gesture that yes, I'm sensitive. I'm ready to take some action. I'm ready to care. Because planting a sapling is just an act of about 10 minutes, but it takes about 2 to 5 years of caretaking, maintenance, watering, manuring, pruning, protecting, safety, safety from goats, safety from cows, safety from buffalo, safety from grazing animals, safety from humans. So there's a complete package that goes into it.
So it's a 2 to 5 year investment.
Exactly, exactly. So first, this is something like, we, when we work with people, we are working about 4 lakh people across the country. Except Kerala, we are working in practically every state, every district. And this is the skill training that we give to our volunteers, that you have to be very careful with the selection of the species, where you are going to plant. If you are planting in Aravali, the taproot, the surface root, the searching roots, they have to be in a certain way. The leaf structure, the leaf morphology has to be in a certain way. I'm not trying to get too technical about it, but what I'm trying to say is that this is serious business.
So if there are people watching this broadcast, as I'm sure there are, what advice would you give them? What kind of trees should they be planting? Should they be looking for local flora and fauna that's grown around that area?
So there's a lot of talk, a lot of misconceptions which revolve around indigenous species, native species. The best way is that the common folk should go for common trees. Whatever you see in your district, whatever you see in your city, right? If you are seeing X number of trees, X number of species, if you can just enhance those number of trees, right? And you can go for parks, you can go for schools, you can go for community spaces. Private lands, of course, they won't allow you. But I think it's very, very important that without any, getting too many people to come to the event. These days what is happening is that it is event based. The plantation becomes event based. And after that nobody comes to water the plant, nobody comes to see the sapling. And that is why we, at an average, India plants the largest number of saplings on the planet. All across. We plant the neck. And our survival is the lowest in the world.
That's because we don't take care of it.
We don't take care. We don't care.
Let me ask Mr. Pradeep Shah, who's also joining us. You know, the reason why this conversation becomes important is because we are losing our forest cover at an alarming rate. I believe India's forest cover, as I showed a moment ago earlier in the broadcast, has come down to less than a quarter. It's 24.62%. In fact, India has lost somewhere in the region of 2 million plus hectares in the last 20 years of forest cover. So planting trees, and as People Baba said a moment ago, not just, the act of 10 minutes of just planting a sapling, but actually taking care of it, which is an investment of 2 to 5 years. That is what is required of people who care about this planet, who want to join this initiative, and of course, who simply want to leave behind a better planet for our future generations, for our children and children's children, than the one that we inherited.
Yes. So, in India, the typical village used to have grazing lands as well as devvans or sacred groves or forests from which they derive fruit, flower, fodder, fuel for the community needs. So what we are trying to do is reforest those community lands, because over time they got destroyed. There's valuable timber in those lands, and so people chopped them down for housing, for various purposes. And the grazing lands continued because they were grasslands, but the forest lands got destroyed. So we are trying to recreate them by involving the community in them. And we have a process that we follow. As People Baba rightly said, if you don't look after them, they won't survive. Yeah. So we have a process that they are first in the nursery for a few months, and then they are planted in sites with the approval of the community, and the community looks after them because the community benefits from the fruit, flower, fodder, fuel. In addition, they provide shade and shelter to nomads and their cattle for fruit, flower, fodder, fuel, as well as shelter for animals and wildlife habitat improvement. Water catchment, that's one of the biggest benefits of trees in India. Soil erosion prevention, so that you don't have the flooding. When a raindrop falls from the sky, it takes away a little bit of the soil with it, and the soil then fills up the basin of the lake or the river, and therefore flooding takes place. So by having a canopy which catches the water and then drips it down slowly, and then the soil is loosened by the roots so that the soil seeps into the ground, that makes it so much better for groundwater to be recharged and soil erosion to be prevented. And of course, climate change, they absorb carbon dioxide. Yeah. The best, simplest way to absorb carbon dioxide. And what Grow Trees did was create a model of Greet with trees. which means you could plant a real tree, not just for the sake of the world, but also for yourself. You could greet a friend for a birthday, anniversary, New Year. Companies started using it to greet employees, engage with customers, or welcome a dignitary, and so on.
Okay, Mr. Shah, People Baba, thank you very much for contributing for the launch of Project One Tree. It's a movement that is being planted today. The wings of green need to spread throughout the country. Let's all commit to planting one tree each and taking care of it. It's not just a one-day, 10 or 15-minute activity. It's a 2 to 5 year investment. It's time we think about trees the way they've been thinking about us, unconditionally. This day, we also launch a content hub that's dedicated to Project One Tree. You can log on to news18features.com/Project One Tree. You'll get more information there about the initiative. Watch a lot of interesting stories on plants and people, some green facts, and much more in the days to come. If you've been tuned in, thank you for your time and thank you for being part of Project One Tree.
This is CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio.
Namaste, Jai Hind, and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand, coming to you live from Moscow, ladies and gentlemen. Behind me is the entire Kremlin premise. Behind those boundaries, the church, and that's the seat of the Russian Federation. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Vladimir Putin will be engaged in bilateral level talks come Tuesday. Right now, they're setting up, and perhaps the Prime Minister is getting ready for that one-on-one dinner, the state dinner that's going to be hosted by President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders are going to be engaging with each other on a one-on-one basis for at least 2 hours. So what is the body language when they walk in and when they come out? That perhaps will tell us a lot. Someone here with me who's going to tell us a lot more from the Russian perspective. I have Saskia Taylor right at the top. Let's just say hi to her. And Saskia, thank you. You're a correspondent presenter with Russia Today. You've been an Asia baby, just like you told us. Now let me ask you, from where you stand today, how do you view this?
Well, I think, look, it's always an honour and a pleasure when a leader is respected, you know, and as influential as Narendra Modi comes and visits Moscow, extra special because it is his first bilateral visit since re-election. I mean, in a way, I think that this is just further consolidation of a really long-standing and time-tested friendship and partnership, both at a personal level. They've talked, Modi and Putin, about how they have implicit trust in one another, and I think that's been an incredibly good building block for country-to-country collaboration and cooperation. I mean, it's actually quite astonishing when you look on the global stage, two nations who literally cooperate almost in every single sphere. You know, nuclear energy, energy security, we're talking about crude oil, we're talking about space, we're talking about defense. I mean, there's so much that binds these two nations. I'm not even talking about the cultural and the educational legacy. Hopefully a consolidation. That's obviously not to say that there aren't issues. Obviously the trade imbalance will have to be addressed at some point. But I think that we're starting at a very positive point. So it's about working out any kinks in the relationship. Where there's a will, there's a way. That's what I always say.
Biden calls for a NATO meeting, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Moscow. Shortly after President Putin has gone to Beijing, he's gone to Vietnam, he's gone to North Korea. What is the Russian thought process right now? Are they allying with all those who are seen as adversarial to America? India's been neutral. So what's the Russian perspective going into this engagement?
Well, you know, I think Russia, despite maybe the rhetoric that is spun about it in some of the mainstream media, has also always been willing to engage in every single nation. People forget that when Vladimir Putin came to power, he wanted to become part of Europe and the European community. He wanted to be part of NATO. But unfortunately, the Russian Federation, I think largely due to its size probably, and the fact that it has always been quite autonomous in its decision policy making, found itself rebuffed almost at every turn. I think from a Russian perspective, it makes the Western rhetoric of President Putin being an international pariah somewhat farcical. I mean, Viktor Orban left just a couple of days ago. I mean, talk about a man who's going out on a limb, coming to Moscow in the middle of the Ukraine conflict, then going on to Beijing, saying he's on his own peace mission. It makes a bit of a laughingstock of, I would say, the diplomats in Brussels. You know, Vladimir Putin, Uzbekistan, Belarus, he was invited to Kiev by Erdogan. And so I think from the Russian perspective, you know what, I think there's a general failure to understand the Russian mentality in the West. And I think that's led to a lot of misunderstanding on a purely kind of human level. Russians have always looked towards Russia, and they've never been too concerned or self-conscious about how they're perceived by the outside world. So I think for them, it's, like I said, always an honor to have a leader like Modi, but for them it's just business as usual, another hot July day.
I know it's a hot July day, but sunny out there outside. I've got to let you go because you've got your own anchoring duties. But one big takeaway that you're looking forward to from this bilateral?
I do think the trade imbalance will be the main key. I mean, there are rumours obviously swirling that they may try and even that out by potentially introducing a pretty innovative rupee-ruble financial mechanism. That would be a big, forgive my language, middle finger to Western sanctions, to the SWIFT financial messaging network. And of course, it would really boost economic interconnectivity between these nations and also boost tourism. Because like I said, it means that me, as a tourist, I can now go to India. I have to take a wad of cash. I can use my Russian equivalent of Visa. So I think that that is probably something, if there's a press conference, though we're hearing that there might not be, potentially on the economic front and making sure there's more parity in terms of the trade turnover, I think that that's probably what we're going to be looking for.
Then the ball is on India's court. Saskia, I'll let you go because your team's asking me to let you go. Thank you so much. Lovely speaking with you. Well, we're live right now and you heard the Russian perspective. It's about the trade imbalance. There is defense cooperation, there is energy cooperation, there is also the regional cooperation with respect to connectivity. But somewhere is trade top of mind. Let's go straight across to our group of experts who are joining us this evening here on this edition of The Right Stand. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra is with us. We have Professor Brahma Chalani, Professor of Strategic Studies, CPR. Ivan Timofeyev, author, is with us. And Xenia Kondratyeva, senior Russian journalist, also joins us. My namaste and good evening to everybody. Thank you very, very much. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, you agree with Xenia and Saskia, because there are many people who have said the trade imbalance, economics, actually dominates the discourse, top of mind, more than geopolitical issues.
Well, I wish it was true, because then it would be in India's favor. After all, we are exporting just about $4 to $5 billion a year compared to our imports of about $60 billion a year from Russia. But I don't think that's really the issue which will be top of the mind of and Mr. Putin. The fact is, the central point is this gesture of Mr. Putin to have one-to-one dinner. That is not the usual happenstance in summits. There are always a few aides present. So having this one-to-one is extremely important, and that will not be about rupees and rubles. That will be about geopolitics. So I differ with your previous guest on that. And I think Mr. Putin may have something substantial to convey to West. He is not in a hurry. If they are not interested, he is not in a hurry to end the Ukraine war, because he knows Biden is a no-go. Biden cannot take decisions. His aides are taking decisions. So he is waiting for the elections in USA to be over. He is also conscious of the fact that Europe at the moment is confused and in a confused political state. So, Mr. Putin's message through Mr. Modi to the West, if at all, would be that let us not escalate matters beyond a point. They are already in a very dangerous state. Let's not go beyond a point, and do not please send your missiles and rockets and so on into the Russian territory, because that will be going beyond the point. As far as Mr. Modi is concerned, I think one or 2 points that need to be focused on from our point of view is that the message for this meeting, fixing of this meeting, if I am not mistaken, came in from Kazakhstan. When Putin was in Kazakhstan after he had met Xi. So is it that there is a message from China which is also being conveyed to India? I think there is more to it than, as I said, rupee-ruble, because otherwise there would not be a need for one-to-one talks.
True. I think I personally am not. I don't understand global politics, policy, and diplomacy as you do in your own learned self. I'm still learning. But for me, the optics would matter, Ambassador Saab. The optics of how the two leaders greet each other before they walk in for dinner, and how they see each other off post they walk in for dinner. I think there we would get a lot of messaging coming from the body language, and will that affect the tone of what's going to be discussed at the bilateral level conversations on Tuesday? We'll have to wait and watch. But Ivan, if I may ask you, what is Russia looking for here? Is it the trade imbalance and sorting it and a payment structure mechanism? Is that going to be top of the line for Russia, or is there something else that Russia would want to bring to the table?
Well, economic issues are definitely of paramount importance in the agenda of the visit. And actually, the overall background is positive. Our trade is rising rapidly. We now have a trade turnover which has tripled in recent years. Though, of course, there are problems like trade imbalance and payment mechanism, etc. But there is a decisiveness from both sides to solve them in one way or another. However, there are other points in the agenda, the political ones. The leaders may compare notes on their visions of the international order. Both India and Russia are the proponents of the multipolar world. They may discuss the regional security. They may discuss transport corridors like north-south transportation corridors, energy security, food security, etc. So the agenda is quite huge, and it can hardly be reduced just to the economic relations between the two powers.
Professor Brahmachalani and Senior, before I come across to you, I just want Arpit, my VJ, who's been doing a fantabulous job here, just to show the Moscow skyline to our viewers. It's a phenomenal view that we've been able to get. That's the river Moskova, and right next to it is the entire Parliament complex, or the Kremlin, ladies and gentlemen. We are right in front of the Kremlin, coming to you from the Kremlin, quite literally, and it's just scenic. It's beautiful, the Moscow skyline. The city itself has a vibe which is very Indian in its feel, culturally, ladies and gentlemen. Although you'd see a lot of foreign faces, but you just feel at home the moment you walk on the streets of Moscow. Somehow, that's what I felt, that's the vibe I felt. There should be more Indians here, there should be more Russians in India, there should be more exchange and open exchange. Perhaps that's what should happen. I'll get you some more of the views. We've got daylight till about 10 p.m. Russia time. It's just about say 6 p.m. here, ladies and gentlemen. So we've got lots of daylight in this summer. But Professor Brahmachalani, this fair weather, does it bring good tidings? And are you going to look beyond the economics and also look at the defense cooperation? Is it going to be revived? Is Russia going to say, hey, why are you buying more from the West and not from us anymore? And is India going to say, hey, where are the S-400s, the remaining two of them? Are we going to get it by 2025?
Well, first, Moscow is a beautiful city. It's a unique city. And the first thing that that strikes you when you're in Moscow is this architecture of Moscow is so fascinating.
Yes.
But I think as far as Russia-India ties are concerned, what's very interesting is that there is a long-standing bipartisan consensus in India that stronger ties with Russia are in India's national interests. So successive governments in India have sought to build closer ties with Russia. So on Russia, there are no divisions of any kind. Second is that in the last couple of years, the West is driving Russia toward China. And this growing closeness with China makes it even more imperative for India to reinforce its ties with Moscow. Modi's Moscow visit has come 3 years late. He was supposed to be in Moscow in 2022 because Putin was in New Delhi in 2021. So this annual summit is now resuming after a gap of 3 years. But in this gap of 3 years, the world has changed in a fundamental sense. If you look at trade and investment flows, they're changing significantly. The world economy is fracturing. It's fracturing into two rival blocs, and the geopolitics has changed fundamentally. since 2022. So for India, the challenge is to maintain its independent approach to international affairs, to pursue a balanced foreign policy. In that larger framework, maintaining good ties and close ties with Moscow is essential to a balanced foreign policy. Because if ties between India and Russia are not close, then it will make it more difficult for India to pursue a balanced foreign policy. And it's also in India's interest to try and persuade Russia not to align itself closely with China. This Western policy of driving Russia closer to China is actually quite inimical to America's own long-term interests. But it's going to impose costs on India. And therefore, maintaining these close ties with Moscow has become very important for India. And in terms of the trade imbalance, I think we shouldn't focus too much on that, because that trade imbalance is largely driven by Indian imports of enormous quantities of Russian oil. So India is importing $65 billion worth of Russian goods and exporting only $4 billion worth of goods, and then to demand that there should be a trade balance, is unfair, because this trade imbalance is largely because of India's oil imports from Russia. And I think that while India should be exporting more to Russia, this is not the priority of Modi's visit to Moscow. The Modi visit is all about geostrategy, about the role that Russia and India can play, and how India can help broker some sort of peace deal between Moscow and Washington. India is uniquely placed. It's the only country that both Washington and Moscow recognize that can be an honest broker to help end the Ukraine war through a ceasefire at least. And I think this is an opportunity for Modi.
Right.
If Modi wants to be proactive, he can play a role in helping broker a ceasefire.
True. But there are multiple views about it, whether India should get involved or not, whether India should broker, or should it be a messenger for either side, or try and do this, tacitly. There are multiple views on it. Many believe that, like you said, that we are the only nation who has an ear on both sides, and we can do it. There are others who believe it's none of our business because there are too many dynamics involved, and that is going to push us into a position where we'll have to compromise our equations with the other. I'll ask Ambassador Rajiv Dogra his thoughts on it. But first, Senior, what is the one thing that you would want President Putin to impress upon his good friend, Prime Minister Modi?
Well, I'm sure there are many ways Mr. Modi can be impressed in Russia. Russia is really a beautiful country, and he's not visited for a few years. And I would say that since his last visit to Moscow in particular, it was not his last visit to Russia though. He visited in 2015. So in these 9 years, the way Moscow changed is unbelievable, irrespective of the challenges and restrictions and sanctions that Russia is facing. You cannot tell, you cannot feel it just looking the way Moscow is. But what's important is that the leaders are finally meeting after a certain gap. And I'm sure they will be having a quite frank conversation. See, the way when we analyze India's relationship with other countries, I think when it comes to Russia, despite both sides acknowledge the challenges that exist, nobody is trying to hide away certain challenges, certain downs, even if there are ups in the relationship. But Moscow has never kind of pressured India, or at least that's what we believe. Unlike, let's say, the West is doing, especially for the past 2 years, over India India refusing to cut ties with Moscow. So I think here we have that a good level of understanding and respect, mutual respect to each other's foreign policy and interest, because India has, in Russia, India's interest. You can look at the defense cooperation, and you mentioned it. Here is an important point. See, Russian companies, Russian defense manufacturers have been licensing the production to Indian companies, Indian PSUs, like for decades, and that continues. Right. And more is happening. There are new projects. Russia is not doing as much PR as one would maybe want it to do, but we have to realize that in the world where there are sanctions, sanctions are used really as a tool of very unjust competition, I would say, because Indian companies are pressurized by Western companies or even governments, and we're talking about serious defense tenders. That's unacceptable. So a lot of work is happening underground, and Russian companies have realized, maybe a bit too late, that India is going very serious about being self-sufficient, especially in defense, and that if you want to remain in the market, if you want to have a larger share or retain your market share, you have to do corporations, you have to set up manufacturing in India, and that's what they are doing.
Right.
So trade, direct imports would become less. Yeah.
Well, let me start the program. In diplomacy, food is important, but it is only a side dish. The main course is the agenda that the two sides bring to the table. So we have to start from there. And there, I think, peace, yes. Both India and any other country in the world mature enough to look at the devastation being caused by the war in Ukraine would say, yes, we are for peace and let's start talking peace. But is it practical at this instant? No. But yes, the process could start, and that would be a step forward. And I think Mr. Putin would certainly urge that of Mr. Modi. And India is not the only player which will then act. China is also in the ring. So maybe that is one way of increasing contacts between India and China and reaching somewhere. The second thing is that unlike the platform West started from, where it thought the entire world would be on its side and Russia would be isolated, the facts are that most of the South or entire South is with Russia and West is isolated. The other big point is that despite the sanctions, the fact is that America right from the beginning winked at India buying oil from Russia, because it was going to be an important stabilizer factor of prices in the world energy market. And that is why West is using India as a transit for refined products for it to buy. So there are lots of games which are going on in diplomacy under the cover of sanctions, despite the sanctions, and because of their need. Another point that I wish to make.
Well, let's hope there are some strong.
That maybe our defense purchases from Russia may have decreased or may be in a limbo at the moment. But if we look at the direction of the Russia seems to have got the upper hand, not just against Ukraine, but against NATO. And their tactics and their strategy and their weapons are proving superior to the best from NATO. So let's not write off Russia as a source of supply and a reliable source of supply of defense equipment.
Right. I thank all our guests. Thank you very, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the coverage continues with the promise that it's an action-packed Tuesday, early start, because Prime Minister Narendra Modi engages with the Indian community here, nearly 500 of them, that's been curated by the Indian Embassy here. And there is a cultural program also early in the morning. 9 a.m., that is Russia time, is when Prime Minister is expected at the community hall or the area, the banquet hall at the Carlton Hotel, where he is going to be meeting the members of the Indian diaspora and the community here. That's about 11:30 a.m. Bharat time. From there till about 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. before he embarks towards Vienna, I'm talking India time, it's going to be a packed day. And we'll get you all the latest. For the moment, taking a very short break. I thank all our guests. When we come back, we are in conversation with Member Parliament of the Russian Federation, Maria Butina. And also, earlier in the day, I spoke with Donald Kuter, principal correspondent with the Russia Today, who tracks President Putin very, very closely. He's traveled with President Putin of late, brings a very unique perspective. Do stay with us.
And News 18's Preeti Sompura is joining us live from Kalina. Preeti, how is the situation currently over there?
Now it started raining heavily across the suburban area of the Mumbai, and you can see, I can show you some of the details, like it's raining heavily, and now the office hours are also started. Besides this, Maharashtra government and the BMC has announced the school and colleges public holiday today, but despite the private offices are still working, so you can see the lots of traffic on the road. You can see the traffic on the road.
All right, we'll try to re-establish that connection with Preeti Sompura, who was giving us all the details of the rainfall that has lashed several parts of Mumbai, and that has led to severe waterlogging in a lot of areas. Andheri subway is closed. In fact, local train services have also been impacted due to the heavy rains that has led to waterlogging. Central and harbour lines are affected due to this, and because of this, the commuters are also facing a lot of difficulties while commuting to their workplaces. But schools and colleges have been ordered to remain shut today. Preeti Sompura is back with us. Preeti, please continue.
Yeah, the schools and colleges are closed today, but the private offices are working today, and so today is it's a peak hour. It already started, so you can see behind me lots of traffic jam behind me. And besides this, IMD has also alerted few minutes ago, IMD has issued a new alert, and it says that orange alert till 3 p.m. today. Besides this, there is at around 1:50 p.m. there is a high tide in the sea. Like the high tide level is around 450 meter. High tide will take place across the Mumbai, but you can see that waterlogging is already there on the streets of the Mumbai, and entire linking road and SC road is fully submerged into a water. Besides, these trains are also badly affected, especially the outbound train, and the express train is also affected due to the heavy rain. And Mumbai-Pune, all the express trains like Pragati Express and the Seagull Express are already cancelled by the Central Railway. Besides this, like BMC has also issued a new alert to the Mumbaikar, like if you have any urgency, then only leave.
Well, we've got the lovely view of the Kremlin right behind us, and it's going to be an important conversation that the two leaders are going to have, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Vladimir Putin. Joining me now is Maria Butina. She's part of the State of Duma, Deputy Member of the International Affairs Committee. Maria, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for being here. That's a joy. And you know, we are here in this sunny weather, which is rare for Moscow. So even the sun, the weather is welcoming you.
Just as Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Putin sit across to talk, have dinner, and of course the bilaterals on Tuesday, there is a NATO meeting that President Joe Biden has called. So you see any geopolitics and optics around here? Because the Kremlin's been saying that the West is jealous.
You know, it's not a coincidence, but it's interesting. So when all these Western countries are talking about the war and destruction, we're talking about peace and union. And that's why it's so sunny and wonderful today. So yeah, the West is jealous. It's jealous because they wanted Russia to be isolated, as they wanted India not to be free. And now Russia is free. Russia and the Soviet Union supported India and your independence a long time ago, and has always been truthful and just with Indian people. And today, India, this is a statement, you know, that Prime Minister comes here and despite all the pressure says we are the sovereign state, we have our national policy, and we are here to sit, to talk about peace and to reach an agreement.
The Russian Federation under President Putin is seen as expansionist, from the annexation of Crimea to the invasion of Ukraine, as the West puts it. What's your perspective?
My perspective is that we had no other choice. And when we see NATO coming closer and closer to our borders, when we see NATO taking Donbass and killing people and kids, and what we could do. Russians have always been defenders of the weak, of the people who need support. That's what we did. And we knew we're going to be in isolation. We knew that the West is going to fight us because they don't want strong countries. They want one United States hegemon. What I hate about the United States is they don't play just. They don't understand what is justice. They set up the rules, they break the rules they actually set up. And when we have competition and we try to be, better in one, and we cannot do it in other things, that's fine. The problem becomes when somebody is a cheater. That's the problem.
Your 2 or 3 most important takeaways that you'd like to see on Tuesday evening once PM Modi leaves Moscow for Vienna?
I actually saw the most important one already. He actually is here. Modi is here. He arrived and he basically said that he has his own view of how his country and his nation should develop itself. So I think the number one issue is done, and I'm sure that the diplomatic vision of both leaders and the agreement of peace will be a great delight for both nations. So I just cannot wait.
Joining us now, Donald, special correspondent with Russia today. Donald, hi, this is Anand here, and thank you for speaking with us here on the News 18 network. How do you view Russia and President Putin view Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit?
Well, I think, the Russian government, of course, really welcomes this visit. It's really important for them because of the fact, first of all, that it's the first visit by Narendra Modi to a foreign power since he was reelected this year. That is, of course, a big occasion and a big reason why the Russian government and Vladimir Putin's administration feels honored that he would choose Russia to be the first place to visit after that reelection. Another important thing, we heard a little bit from the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, in the run-up to this meeting, and he talked about Indian-Russian relations. He said they're on a very serious level. They're very important to Moscow. And that's why the agenda that they have for this 2-day visit from Narendra Modi to Moscow is packed with stuff. They want to see talks between both leaders, other talks between both delegations. And Moscow's also shown interest in having Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi speak a bit in a more informal context as well. There's, of course, a dinner planned between the two leaders where they'll get to speak about some of the stuff they have on the agenda. Of course, energy cooperation is one of the main things that Moscow and the Kremlin specifically said it was interested in discussing and further developing. But that's tied into the bigger question of turnover, economic trade turnover between the two countries as well, because we have to remember, right, that between 2023 and 2024, trade turnover between India and Russia reached nearly $65 billion worth. That's, very huge. Of course, Russia and India have long had good economic relations, trade, specifically in the defense sector as well. But since the start of the military operation, really, Russia began exporting a lot more energy resources to India. And actually, this is something that the Indian side mentioned in the run-up to this visit. They said that they wanted to, one of the things they wanted to accomplish in this visit to Moscow is sort of balancing out the trade balance between the two countries. It's about, $4 billion worth of Indian exports to Russia and around $61 billion worth of Russian exports to India. So the Indian delegation wants to sort of balance out that trade turnover.
So let me ask you this. So what are the areas where Russia believes that this balance can be achieved? Because that balance is important for the direct trading in currencies. Unless there is a balance, because Russia has been able to achieve that with China. So what are the areas where this can be achieved between India and Russia?
Well, I think based on the fact that I heard, I read about specifically this proposal coming from the Indian side of balancing the trade balance. Russia's, of course, thrilled to continue to export oil and other energy resources to India, especially after the U.S. sanctions that followed the launching of the Russian military operation. So I think it would be up to the Indian side to make suggestions where they may be willing to, where they would be interested in sending more exports to Russia. And I'm sure the Russian side will listen with open ears. I mean, the main one that I can think of, based on what I've read in the media over the last months and since the military operation began, is that Indian pharmaceuticals are very interesting for Russian businesses right now and for the Russian government. I think that's probably an area where India can actually increase the amount of goods it's exporting to Russia. Probably in the pharmaceutical sphere, I would say would be the primary one.
Let's talk about the big elephant in the room, 2 years of the conflict, the sanctions that you mentioned. What is Russia's point of view on this entire conflict and what's happening?
Well, Russia, I think, has made its goals in the military operation very clear, and the purpose for launching it in the first place. It's because the West had sponsored a coup d'etat in Ukraine that many people in Ukraine saw as illegitimate, decided to vote in referendums for the independence of their regions, specifically Lugansk and Donetsk. And after ceasefire negotiations were negotiated, the Minsk agreements, for anyone who isn't familiar with them, Ukraine decided to disregard them. The West did. It's now clear that the West did not take them seriously, based on statements from Angela Merkel, former German chancellor, and former president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, who essentially said that these ceasefire agreements were not meant to actually achieve peace. They were meant to buy time for the Ukrainian war effort for a larger conflict with Russia. So only when it became clear definitively that Ukraine was not going to abide by these agreements and was going to continue hostilities against the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, that's finally when Russia entered in and launched the military operation to defend these two former Ukrainian regions that had declared independence and had long wanted to become part of Russia, actually. And in terms of the current position of the Russian government, I mean, it's undoubtedly one of peace negotiations. The only party to the conflict right now that's actually calling to sit down at the negotiating table and have peace negotiations right now is Russia. Ukraine has completely rejected them. Vladimir Zelensky even altered the law in Ukraine to exclude any sort of negotiations with Vladimir Putin's administration. The West is also, not supporting peace negotiations with Russia. And they even made a peace conference that didn't invite Russia. I mean, how are you going to have a peace conference that doesn't invite all parties to the conflict so they can sit down and discuss some sort of plan? I mean, that's just not, that's obviously not a move that actually seriously desires to get anything done. But again, Moscow's position is all for peace negotiations. They want to see talks. They've welcomed with open arms China's proposals, peace proposals, something that the West and Ukraine have rejected. I was on other Indian TV channels discussing this subject, and a lot of your journalists actually said that it would be interesting if Narendra Modi brought forward his own Indian peace proposal for the Ukraine conflict. And I think if he did, it's likely that Vladimir Putin and his administration would consider it and take it very seriously. I mean, the bigger question is whether the West would be interested in that.
Do you believe Bharat should make a move to try and broker peace and to try and end this conflict, or would you want the equations to remain separate, where we as a country, India as a country, continues to engage with the West, continues to speak with Ukraine and help them out in terms of the people and the distress there, and while continuing to work with Russia, who are old friends? Where is the view here? Would you want India to intervene, PM Modi to play a role? And do you think this is on the table when the two leaders meet this evening?
I think it is on the table. It's, of course, it depends on what exactly Narendra Modi has in mind. But I think if it would be completely plausible for him if he were to put forward some sort of well thought out peace proposal in the Ukraine conflict. I think Vladimir Putin's administration would take it seriously and consider it and be open to further discussions on the topic. And I think that, like you mentioned, right, India is not categorically on Russia's side in the Ukraine conflict. It's chosen a position of neutrality. And this is something that Russia is completely okay with. And this is really the difference between the way the U.S. has tried to pressure other countries into joining its sanctions regime against Russia, trying to punish any country that continues to do business with Russian banks and Russian financiers, whereas Russia is more than willing to do business with India, and even if India continues to do business with the United States and other countries in the West, as it continues to do, that bears no influence on the way that Russia is going to conduct its bilateral relations with India.
My final question, your two big takeaways, and also on this effort or this conversation around de-dollarization, that nations like China and Russia are actually pushing for this de-dollarization, and that cannot be achieved till the time there is an equity in terms of the trade balance. For you, what are going to be the two main takeaways over the next 24 hours?
Well, one of the good things that we've already seen between Indian trade turnover between India and Russia is the fact that a huge amount of it is done in national currencies. So that already, at least in the example of India and Russia, has done a lot to contribute to de-dollarization. I'm not sure what specific proposals the Indian delegation and Narendra Modi have for this meeting with Vladimir Putin, but it would be interesting.
Please stay safe at the home. And you can see that already water logging is already there, and besides this, heavy rainfall is already started in the suburban parts of the Mumbai, and not only in Mumbai but the city connected to the Mumbai like Navi Mumbai, Thane, and even in the Raigad and in the Sindhudurg area, the heavy rainfall is already starting.
Preeti, since when has it been raining in Mumbai?
Since last 1 a.m. till 7 a.m., the IMD department has recorded around 300 millimeter rainfall in the Mumbai, which is very high, because earlier we have seen that around 100 mm to 150 mm, the entire Mumbai submerged into water. But this time in the early morning, rainfall was around 300 mm, and due to this, the most of the parts of the Mumbai are under the submerged into the water. And as a few minutes ago, BMC alerted a new alert that around in the afternoon there is a high tide. So BMC has informed the people not to go outside their home. Besides this, private school and colleges are also closed in Mumbai, but the private offices are still working. So now the BMC has informed the private offices that if you don't have any urgency, then close your office today.
All right, Preeti, please stay with us. We're also being joined by CNN News 18's Yasha Kotak, who's live with us from Ghatkopar. Yasha, how is the situation over there?
So yes, as of now, when you speak of Ghatkopar station, what has in fact come to forth is that several, of course, there are several parts, which is the western line as well as certain parts in the central line, be it around Bhandup and Nahur area, or for that matter around Kurla, where there is still waterlogging. In some parts, particularly here, what you can see is a bit of the tracks have been submerged. However, train movement has started slowly. In fact, around 5:30 was where there was extremely high waterlogging on the tracks as well. But as of now, when you speak of the central line, train movement has begun slowly on several stretches, particularly some parts of the platform. They've been kept some tracks, that is the slow line tracks and the fast line tracks, have been kept shut as of now, because the waterlogging still continues at Sayan, or for that matter at Bhandup as well. But here, when you speak of some of the outstation trains, they've been allowed to move. Central line, of course, has issued advisory about how there have been 5 trains which have been shut. The 5 long distance trains, which includes the Deccan Queen, also for that matter Pragati Express. All of these trains have as of now been cancelled, because beyond Thane is where we see there is a limited movement of trains. Also, you see this is of course one of the busiest stations. But today, considering the fact that there have been advisories that have been issued by Central Railway as well as by the BMC, asking people to stay indoors, which is where of course a lot of people had gotten to know early in the morning that train services have been suspended, which is where there is a limited movement, limited flow of people.
Heavy rainfall that has lashed several parts of Mumbai. Now there is waterlogging being reported in the low-lying areas of Mumbai. In fact, Harbour Line and Central Line are also affected due to the waterlogging.
This is CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. We're coming to you live from the CNN News 18 and Federal Bank Primetime Studio. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Moscow for a two-day visit to Russia. This is the first time he's traveling there since the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war 2 years ago. It comes at a time that is delicately balanced, both internationally as well as domestically. Globally, if you look at it, India has taken a very slightly different position, a nuanced position, away from the position taken by its friends and partners in the West, namely America and Europe, on doing business with Russia since this war.